Okay, and welcome to JQuery Part 4, where you're going to be learning a ton of plugins inside of JQuery. Now, plugins are fantastic because they allow you to write very little code and create some cool stuff. Now, you've probably already seen a couple of these plugins on websites, so the first one we're going to take a look at is probably the most popular one, and it's called FancyBox. And you can see that my browser is locked on to fancybox.net, and basically what this is, it's just a little box that pops up on the page, and it allows you to display images, HTML content, and multimedia elements. Now if you scroll down, you're able to see a few previews of this. If I click on one of those images, you'll see the little box pops up, and you got this nice shadow around it. You got the close button up top, and you can do lots of stuff with this. As you can see, it's added a description on this one, and you can also create galleries as well with this, with the back and forth button. You can do Ajax requests, iframes, and Swift multimedia content. So that is really impressive. Now, most people will be thinking, well, that looks kind of difficult to do, but trust me, it's so easy, it's unbelievable. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to download FancyBox. So I'm going to go ahead and click download. I'm going to save that file. Okay, it should only take a few seconds to download. And then I'm going to open up my downloads folder. And as you can see, the fancybox.zip is inside of there. I'm going to extract all of its content out. So I'm going to right click, say extract to here. And then you'll see a folder in here, and basically we're not interested in any of this stuff. We're only interested in the FancyBox folder. Okay, and I can take a look at a couple of examples that they've got on the index.html page, but I just want this folder right now. And if you go into the folder, you'll be able to see that it contains all the images that is required for the FancyBox, the CSS style sheet to style this all, and also it has the JavaScript files in order for it to run properly. So I'm going to right click and cut that out, and then I'm going to paste it inside of my JQuery source directory, okay, which is my website root directory. Okay, now I have that. I'm just going to minimize those two, and I'm going to open up Dreamweaver. And as you can see, I've deleted out all the HTML elements and all the CSS rules out of here. And what I'm going to do is import all the necessary files for this plugin to work. So the first thing that I'm going to do is attach that CSS file. So I'm going to open up the CSS panel, say attach style sheet, and then I can browse to the style sheet. So that's inside of the FancyBox folder, and then I'm selecting jQuery.fancybox, okay, and click OK, and then OK, and then it inserts the CSS style sheet in like so. And as a personal preference, I like importing the CSS above where I import my JavaScript files, so I recommend putting it above that. And then what I'm going to do is import all the fancybox.js files in between the jQuery file and the myfirstscript.js. And the reason for that is because all the FancyBox scripts require jQuery to be running first. So I load jQuery first, then I load all of the FancyBox scripts, which is 4 in total, and the last one is myfirstscript.js, because in that file I'm going to be calling back the FancyBox function. So I want that to be below where I've imported my FancyBox script. So I'm going to import them in between those two. So I'm going to open up the script tag, say source, I'm going to browse, and I'm going to go to a FancyBox folder, and then I'm going to select my first.js file there, and I'm going to again define the type text/JavaScript, and I'm going to end the script tag like so. I'm just going to copy that to save time, and I'm going to open up the script tags again, say source, browse to the second JavaScript file, and paste in like so I don't have to keep writing that. And again, do the same, say script, source, select the third one, and then we want the fourth one. I'm going to paste in like so. Okay, so now all the necessary files for FancyBox to work are in. So what we need to do first is create a HTML element. So I'm going to create just a simple link to start out with. So I'm going to create an anchor tag with an ID of box. Okay, and then I'm going to add the href attribute, but this time I'm not going to give it a value of hash, just saying, you know, don't go anywhere. I want to browse to whatever element that I want to show inside of the FancyBox. So if I say browse, and I'm just going to go up a folder, and as you can see in the images folder I've added a few images. I'm just going to add this Cartoon Smart logo with the black background. And that is the image that's going to appear inside of the FancyBox. Alright? So that's what the href is all about right there when you're considering using FancyBox. And I'm just going to call this image. Okay, I'm going to save that, and I'm going to go ahead and refresh this inside of Firefox and click on image, and as you can see it takes you straight to the image. But I don't want that. I want FancyBox to show it for me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and go over to myfirstscript.js, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the element that I want to apply the FancyBox function onto. So I'm going to say go ahead and get the element with the ID of box, okay, like so, and then I'm going to call back the FancyBox function. Okay, so we put the dot in. Okay, so this then allows us to call back a function, and we're going to call back the function FancyBox. Okay, so this isn't a method, this isn't an event listener, it's just simply calling back a function. Okay, then I'm going to open brackets, open parentheses, close brackets, and end with a semicolon. Save that, go ahead and refresh, and click on the image link. And as you can see, this image opens up in the FancyBox. Alright, so that is literally how easy it is. You just have to literally attach that FancyBox function onto there. Now, in between those opening and closing parentheses, we can define some properties of this function. So, I'm going to space down a couple lines in between there, and I'm going to say, let's get rid of the border, okay? Because you can see, when I click on image, it adds this white border around the edges. Let's say that I don't want that. Well, I have to use the padding property. So in quotation marks I say padding, okay, then I say comma, and then I just say 0, okay. So I'm going to save that, I'm going to go ahead and refresh, click on image again, and as you can see it gets rid of that white border around the edges. Really easy and really simple. Okay. You can also choose different types of animations if you wish. So I can put a comma in here. Okay, just like you do with the animate method, even though this isn't a method, it's still laid out in the same sort of way, where you've got the property name and then you've got the value of that property. Then if you want to add another property, you put the comma in, okay? And then I'm going to say transition in with a capital I, okay? So transition in. So when I click on it, do an animation, okay? And in quotation marks I'm going to write elastic. Okay, and I'm going to save that, and I'm going to go ahead and refresh and click on that. You'll be able to see that it sort of scoots out and it shows it instead of fading it, alright? And again, you can choose fade instead, so you've got elastic, fade, like so, okay, it just fades in and out. And you have none, okay, so you've got elastic, fade, or none, which is no animation, of course, okay? But that's only the transition in. When I close this fancy box, you'll see it fades out, and that's because you have to set the transition out. So I'm going to put the comma in there, and I'm going to open the quotation marks, and I'm going to say transition out with a capital O, and then I'm going to put a comma in there, and then in quotation marks I'm going to set how I want it to transition out. Again, you have the choice of elastic, fade, or none. So if I say none and save that and go ahead and refresh and say image, you'll see that it doesn't have any animation in and it doesn't have any animation out. Okay, I can change one to fade, and transition in can be elastic, and so forth and so on. And you can carry on with that. Okay, so you've got the elastic animation in, and then you've got the fade out. Alright. Now you can also add descriptions, of course. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my index.html file, and I'm going to add a title attribute to this anchor tag. So I'm going to say title like so, okay, and then we'll say cartoon smart logo. I'm going to save that, and let's go ahead and refresh and see what we get. So I'm going to click on image, and as you can see, it basically puts a title attribute inside of a little box at the bottom of the image that we've got here. Now you can also change the positioning of that. You could say, if I go back to my first script.js, again I'm going to add a comma in there because I'm adding another property. I could say title position, and I could say inside. Okay, so what it's going to do is it's going to put it inside the fancy box instead of having a separate box to display this. So go ahead and refresh, click on image, and as you can see, it's putting it straight inside of the fancy box. And you can also have over. Okay, save that, refresh, and it's going to just basically put the title over the image. Okay, so it's really, really easy. Now let's say that you have the title attribute on your element, but you have the title attribute there for the narrator. Okay, because when people have visual impairments, they can enable the narrator on their computer, and it reads the title attribute on the page. Okay, now that's great, but let's say that we have that there for that reason, but we don't want to show it on the fancy box itself. Well, what you can do is, again, go back to my first script.js, and instead of saying title position, we'll say title show. Again, show with a capital S. So it's always, you know, the first word is all lowercase and the second word has a capital in front of it. Okay, so I can then say true or false. Now whenever you're saying true or false, you don't put it inside of quotation marks. Okay, so we just say false. Okay, so then it will not show the title, and again it's not inside of quotation marks. Okay, so I'm going to hit refresh, and I'm going to say click on image again, and it's still got the title attribute on there, because you can see when I hover over that link, you'll see that it says cartoon smart logo, which is what the title attribute is, but it doesn't show the title on the lightbox. Okay, now let's get a little bit more complex. Let's make a gallery like you saw on the fancybox.net homepage. They had a little gallery going off there. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to our index.html file, and we're going to add in a second element. So we're going to add in the anchor tag again, give it a href. We'll link this to the cartoon smart logo with the white background, and then we'll give this an ID of box 2. Okay, and I'll just call this link image 2, like so. Okay, now we need to link these two elements together. So the way that you do that is you add the rel attribute. So I'm going to say rel, rel, and then I'll just call this G1, standing for gallery 1. And then I'm going to do the same for the second element, because you have to link that one as well. So I'm going to say rel, and then we're going to say G1, okay? So now these two elements are linked together, but because they are named with IDs, we have to add the fancy box function not only to the ID of box, but also to the ID of box 2 as well. So I need to put the $sign in, go ahead and get the ID, the element with the ID of box 2, and just simply call back the fancy box function. Okay, I'm going to save that. Make sure you save the index.html file, and then we're going to refresh. Okay, so now when I click on image, you'll see that when we hover over the right side of that fancy box, you'll see that we get a little arrow that's pointing to the right, which means that it's going to go to the next image. And you'll see that we don't get any arrow when we hover over the right side of this image, because there is no images for it to move on to. So we've only got a back button, which is on the left hand side of the fancy box. Okay, like so. And then we can add in as many of these elements as we want. So let's add in another anchor tag with a href. We'll link this to the blue Cartoon Smart logo. Give that an ID of box 3. Give it the rel attribute, G1, and then we can simply say image 3, that's the link title, and then obviously we have to add in another statement for this one. So we say box 3 dot fancy box, so we're calling that fancy box function on there, and then again opening and closing your brackets and parentheses. If you've not got any properties or settings for this function, you do not need the opening and closing parentheses, just as a quick side note. So if we go back and hit refresh, you'll see that we have image 2 and image 3. So when I click on that, you'll see that we have on the very first image an arrow that points to the right, and then that takes us to the next image. Now we have a right button and a left button, so we can go back and forward on this one. Okay, and again we're on the last one, so we can't go forward again, so there's no forward button, but there's a back button on the left hand side. Okay, so really nice and really simple, and again whichever one you click on, it still is respective of its location. Okay, like so. Now instead of constantly calling back the fancy box function on each one of these elements, it seems, well, kind of pointless. So what we're going to do is we're going to remove those two statements, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the ID attribute of those elements to a class attribute of gallery. Okay, and I'm going to do the same for these lot. I'm just going to copy that, and I'm going to do the same for those. Okay, I'm going to remove that ID and change that out for a class of gallery, and then I'm going to go back to my first script.js and change this one and say, okay, well, instead of getting the ID of box, we're going to say get the class of gallery. Save that, go ahead and hit refresh, and it does exactly the same thing. Okay, like so. But this is much quicker code because it doesn't keep reapplying the fancy box function. It's just grabbing all those elements in one go, making it quicker. Alright, and then all those settings or properties that you've applied to this function will apply to all those elements, so you can control all those elements in one single go. Okay, so this is one method of using the FancyBox plugin, which is we're just displaying images, which is probably most popular for, but you can do so much more with this. You can create iframes with it, so what we're going to do is remove all this code out, and we're also going to go back to index.html, and we're going to just create one anchor tag that's going to link to the Cartoon Smart website. So I'm basically saying to the iframe, what are you going to load? So I'm going to say load cartoonsmart.com, and then we'll give this an ID of Cartoon Smart. Alright, and again we'll display to the user the link Cartoon Smart. Alright, we're going to save that, and we'll just save the myfirstscript.js and go ahead and preview that inside of the browser. I click the Cartoon Smart link and it will load the Cartoon Smart website. Now this is what will happen if JavaScript is disabled in the browser. Okay, so if the user has disabled their JavaScript, it just loads the page that you've requested, which is good. But if they have JavaScript enabled, we want it to show inside of a FancyBox. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to myfirstscript.js, and then we are simply going to start out a new statement. We want to select the element with the ID of Cartoon Smart, and we want to call back a function, which is FancyBox. And then I'm going to open brackets, open parentheses, close bracket, and then end with a semicolon to tell the browser you've finished with that statement. Then I'm going to select in between those two opening and closing parentheses and space down a couple lines. And what we're going to do is we're going to set the type of this FancyBox script. Okay, so I'm going to open and close quotation marks. Inside of there I'm going to say type. That's the property name, and then we're going to set the type to be an iframe. Again, put that inside of quotation marks. Okay, save that, go ahead and refresh, click Cartoon Smart, and as you can see it opens up inside of its own little window with the FancyBox script. Okay, now you can also choose the width and the height, because obviously that didn't look right, so I'm going to put a comma in there, and we'll set the width. Alright, and we'll set the width, and you can set this either in percentage or pixels. I mean, you could just say 300. Alright, 300 pixels, and the height like so. Then put a comma in there and say 300 again. Save that, go ahead and refresh the page. Now click Cartoon Smart, you'll see it opens up in a much bigger window. Alright, but you can also do that in percentages form. You could say 75% of the window, whatever that may be. So it's no longer a fixed width and height. Go ahead and hit refresh, and then click the Cartoon Smart link, and it shows 75% of the width and the height of the page, or the browser window. Okay, so that's how you can create iframes using the FancyBox script. Now you can also do callbacks. Okay, now what a callback is it allows you to target an event or a state in which the animation is at, and it will do something. Do whatever you want it to do, but I'll just show you this very, very quickly. Alright, I'm going to remove all this code, and then I'm going to change this. Okay, I'm going to change this to a standard image again. So I'm going to say href, and then I'm going to say browse, and I'm just going to browse to an image. Okay, like so, and then I'm going to save that. I'm going to go back to myfirstscript.js, and then I'm going to start doing some callbacks on it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say on start. Okay, so as soon as the user clicks that button, they've basically started this function going. So I'm going to say as soon as it starts, I'm going to run a function. Alright, open and close brackets, open and close parentheses, and then in between those two opening and closing parentheses, I'm going to space down a couple lines. Okay, and then I'm going to make a return window now, or a confirm window. Basically, this confirm window confirms whether the user wants to apply that action. So it says OK or cancel. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say return window. Oops, not spelt like that. Window dot confirm. There you go. See, even Dreamweaver's got that, so that is very standard, just like the alert dialog box. So we're just saying window confirm, and then we say in quotation marks, do you want to continue? Okay, and end with a semicolon because you're finishing off that statement. So as soon as the user clicks on that element, as soon as that animation starts to get rocking and rolling, it's going to stop it, run a function, and that function can do anything, by the way. I'm just doing a quick window.confirm, and you'll see how that works in just a second, but it's very, very easy to do. But you could do anything in there. You could select another element, fade it out. You can do whatever you want. But what I'm saying is, as soon as the animation gets going, we're going to run a function that's simply going to return a window saying do you want to continue, OK or cancel. So I'm going to save that, and then I'm going to go back and I'm going to go to the page, refresh, click on it, and as soon as I click on it, you'll see the window says do you want to continue, and it has an OK or cancel. If I say cancel, nothing happens. If I click on it again and say OK, the window opens up. Alright, so that's how you make a confirm window. Okay, and you have many other types of callback. Okay, you could also have on complete. So as soon as the window's finished loading and everything, all the fancy boxes finished loading and showing properly, as soon as that is complete and all the animations are out of the way, we can then tell it to run another function. So I can say on complete. Again, the first word, which is on, you'll see they're all lowercase, and then the second word always has a capital in front of it, just like the C in complete and the S in start right there. And then I can run another function, and if I just again space down a couple lines. Oh, but don't forget that you're adding a second property. If you think about this like one big property, if I put this all back on one line, you'll see that we missed one tiny little fundamental thing, which is that is your property. And again, if you want to add another property, you have to put the comma in. Okay, so it's quite important that you remember that right there. And then I can run a second callback, and that callback is when the animation is complete, when it's showing fully. I'm just going to say return, and then, or in fact, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to say alert. Okay, and we're going to alert the user that it's finished. So I'm going to open that up and say finished. That's the message that will be displayed inside of that box, and then end with a semicolon. Okay, I'm going to save that, and then I'm going to go back and refresh. I'm going to click on it. Okay, we still get that. Do you want to continue? I say okay, and then as soon as it's complete, finish fading in and all the rest of it, it's going to bring up that window saying finished. And again, you don't have to, make a silly alert box. You could do anything. You could literally fade out the anchor tag on the page. So let's do that. Let's say when this thing's finished showing the light box, we want to get rid of that link. So I'm going to select the link. So I'm going to select the element with the ID of Cartoon Smart, like so, and then I'm simply going to say fade out. So it's going to fade out that link. I'm going to save that, going to go ahead, go back, refresh, and then I'm going to click on the Cartoon Smart again, saying do you want to continue, okay, and as you can see, when it completes, it fades out that link element, or whichever element we tell it to fade out. Okay. It's also important to remember that this doesn't work. Okay, if I put this in here, it will not work, even though we're attaching this function onto this element right here, this will not work. As you can see, if I hit refresh, click on that, say OK, it loads up, the link's still there. So this doesn't work when using plugins, alright? You need to refer to the object. It's a little bit different when, you know, working to your, as you were previously with the methods and event listeners. So it's a little bit different when you're using third-party plugins, bit of a different environment. So I'm going to click Cartoon Smart, click OK, and now you can see it fades away. As soon as I click this close button, I want it to fade back in again. So the way to call back a function for that one is you, instead of saying on complete, you say on clean up. And don't forget, you need to put that colon, sorry, because we're identifying another new property. So I'm just going to space that all on one line so you can see that a bit easier. Again, that's our first property, then we put a comma in, second property, and then obviously put a comma in, and then we're going to have our third property, and that's going to be on clean up, capital C, and that's all that's needed. And then we're going to run a function, open close brackets, open close parentheses, space down a couple lines, and basically as soon as that close button is going to close, I'm going to select that Cartoon Smart element and simply tell it to fade in, like so. Going to hit a refresh, click on that. Do you want to continue? OK. As soon as it loads, it gets rid of it. As soon as I say the close button, it's going to fade it back in again. Okay. And you could even put a return window on that, so you could say return window dot confirm do you want to close this box? Okay, and with a semicolon, save that, go ahead and refresh, go back, and then we can say, Cartoon Smart, do you want to continue? Yeah. Goes in, say close, and now it brings up the box saying, do you want to close this box? And then you can say cancel to keep it open, or you could say OK, and it gets rid of the box. So that's pretty much my brief demonstration on what the Fancy Box can do. Now if you go back to the Fancy Box website, you are able to see all the settings and stuff that you can tweak and change under API and options. If you take a look under there, I recommend you read all documentation on this plugin, as well as looking at all of these settings you can affect with the Fancy Box. Okay, so really this is a very, very powerful script, okay, and you can do tons with this, and lots of websites use it. It's a very, very powerful plugin, and as you can see, it saves you a whole heap of time in coding. It just does it for you, and it's really easy and really simple. Plus, as I said before, it's degradable. So when a script is degradable, such as when I spoke about the iframe, if JavaScript is disabled, it still goes to the link. But if JavaScript is enabled, it shows it in the Fancy Box. So that's what you're wanting. You're wanting plugins that are degradable, so they work with and without JavaScript. It's very important that you remember that. Now, the next script that we're going to be looking at is the Scroll2 plugin, and this plugin allows you to basically slide elements about. It's a really cool script, and if you go to fleshler.blogspot.com, not sure if I pronounced that right, but if you go to that webpage right there, or just type in Google Scroll2 JQuery plugin, and you will sure enough find it. And basically, if we go and take a look at a demo, if you scroll down enough, you'll be able to see you can go to a demo page, and in there you're able to see that when I click on something, it allows us to either use relative positions, absolute positions, it allows us to target DOM elements, so that's the one we're going to be taking a look at, targeting DOM elements and so forth. So what I need to do is download this script. So I'm going to go back to the website. I'm going to click on this link right here, jQuery.scroll to 1.4.2.zip. I'm going to click that, and I'm going to save the file. Like so. It shouldn't take very long. And if I go to my download folder, I'm just going to remove the fancy box stuff out of there. I'm also going to open up my JQuery website. I'm going to get rid of the fancy box folder. Like so. Okay, and there it is. It's gone. And so what I need to do now is go back to my download folder, and I want to extract this zip file. So I'm going to right click on it and say extract here. By the way, I'm using WinRAR to extract these, and so I have the changes.txt just tell you what they've added to this, and I can get rid of that. So I'm just going to take those two files and I'm going to cut them and paste them right into my source directory. Okay, I'm going to paste them straight there. Okay, so I have my scroll to scripts right there, and then all I'm going to do is embed those scripts inside of the index.html page. So I'm just going to delete out all this JavaScript right here, but leave the basic function. And then I'm going to remove all these scripts because now they've been removed, as well as the CSS script, don't forget. Okay, and again, this plugin requires jQuery to be running, so obviously I need to import it below where jQuery is, but since I'm going to be calling back that function, I need to make sure that that script is below where I've imported all my other scripts. Okay, so again, we'll start opening our tags, say script, then we'll say source, we'll select the file that we want to embed, and I want to embed this file right here. I'm going to say type, then I say text/JavaScript. Alright, and then I'm going to do the same for the other script. So I'm going to say script source src, select the other one, which is that one right there, say type text/JavaScript. Okay, so now everything is up and running on that page. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to create some div tags. Okay, so I'm going to create a div, and we'll give this an ID of page 1. Alright, and we'll end that like so, and I'm just going to copy that and paste that 5 times like so. Then I'm just going to change all those IDs because we cannot have the same ID. So those are basically all of my pages. Okay, now let's add some style to them. Okay, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in a hash and say get page 1, and then I'm just going to put in a background color for each one of these. So I'll have an orange background color, and then we'll do page 2, give that a background color, but a different background color. Let's make this a blue. Some awful coloring going off, but never mind. Page 3, give that a good background color. Make that a yellow. Page 4, background color. And we shall make this purple. And finally, page 5, give that a background color. of red, and end it like so. Now I also want to give these pages the same width, the same height, and I want to tell them to float to the left so they all stack up next to one another. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a class to one of these. Instead of keep rewriting those rules inside of all those CSS rules, I'm just going to simply add a class in and call this page. Okay, I'm going to copy that and paste it on each element. Like so. Okay, so all these classes are applied to those div elements. And so what I'm going to do is, again, create a new CSS rule and say get all the classes that have the class name of page, and then I want to give it a width 300 pixels, a height of 300 pixels, and I want to tell it to float to the left. Okay, save that, go ahead and refresh the page. Okay, and we have all these div tags in here like so. Okay, possibly make them a bit smaller so they all fit in. So we'll change that to 200 and 200, and again that makes it so much more easier. Hit refresh, and as you can see, all of those div tags now line up, and they're all 200 pixels each, and they all fit on one line. Okay, so what I need to do is I want to show only one of these pages or one of these div tags at a time. So what I need to do is wrap all of this, okay, all of that inside of the div tag, okay, in another div tag. So you can either click this button right here, or you can just add a div tag that wraps around them. But with Dreamweaver it makes it easy. So I'm going to wrap this in a tag, I'm going to give it a div ID, and we'll call this container. Alright, so now you'll see that everything is wrapped inside of that container like so. And if I just indent that, it'll look a bit better. Okay, so there is my main container, and all my pages are nested inside of it. Now I need a few links. Okay, these links are going to point to these pages. So I need 5 links. So I'm going to add an anchor tag, add ID page 1. And we'll leave it with a href of nothing, and we'll end the tag like so. Okay, and then I'll just say page 1, or in fact, sorry, no, because we've already got an ID, we'll say btn 1, which stands for button 1. Okay, so then I'm going to paste that 5 times and say 2, 3, 4 and 5. And then what I need to do is I need to style this container tag. This container tag needs to have a width of 200, a height of 200, and an overflow of hidden. So if I put in a hash again, say go get the element with the ID of container, and we'll add a width of 200 pixels, height of 200 pixels, and we'll also say overflow hidden. So anything that goes outside the boundaries of the element is hidden. So I say overflow hidden. Okay, I can save that, and then when we go back we should only see one page, and we've got all those links up the top there. And let's quickly change those like so. Okay, so the links match the pages like so. Okay, in fact, let's close that window real quick, don't need that open. So I have page 1, page 2, page 3. At the moment they're going absolutely nowhere. Okay, now if I was to actually put in, instead of saying hash and then nothing, if I was actually to put the hash and then the ID name, let's see what happens. So I can say page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, and obviously page 5. So much like we're using the CSS selectors up here, alright? You'll notice it's the same thing that we're doing here. We're actually selecting, we're linking to DOM elements, which is the HTML elements, by using the href attribute, okay? So I'm going to save that. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to refresh, and then I'm going to click on page 2. As you can see, it goes to page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, and page 1 again. Now the reason why this is important, okay, is because that means that we've got no JavaScript that's controlling these pages, okay? So even if the user has their JavaScript disabled in their browser, the pages, they can still see the pages, and that is very, very important, that you're making your scripts degradable, much like the fancy box. If the JavaScript was turned off, it would look at that picture, or it would go to the website. If they had JavaScript enabled, it showed them in a nice fancy box, and this is very, very important. You must make sure that try to at least every project you get, make sure that it's degradable so it works without JavaScript. So at the moment this is working very well without JavaScript, okay? But now let's say that, okay, well, I've got JavaScript enabled in this browser, let's start adding a little animation. Let's start sliding these about rather than just show, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my first script.js, okay? And the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to create a variable, and this variable is going to basically have a statement that's selecting the container, alright, which is the main element. It's the top level element that has all these pages nested inside of it. So I'm going to say var, which is variable. I'm going to give this variable a name. So again, to make sure that I know this is a JQuery variable, I can put the $ in there. It's best practice, but not required. So I'm going to put the $ in there, and I'm going to say target. Alright, so that's what I'm targeting, and I'm going to target the element with the ID of container. And again, you started your statement, so you just need to end that with a semicolon. Alright, so we've created a variable that's simply targeting the container element. Now what I want to do is I want to say, okay, well, when I click on page 1, it needs to scroll to the div element page 1, and so on and so forth for the rest of the links. So I'm going to say, again with the $, I'm going to say, alright, well, wait until btn1 is clicked, which is this anchor tag. Wait until that's clicked. It's clicked. Then run a function, just like we did before, and again end that with a semicolon. And once we have done that, we simply want to grab our variable. Okay, so it's pretty much exactly the same as us doing this. Okay, just simply targeting the container like that. Then what we do is we say dot scroll to with a capital T. Okay, dot scroll to, and then we open and close brackets and end with a semicolon. Now we're going to move on to looking at changing this in just a second, but basically I've already written that inside of my variable, so I might as well just write my variable name right there. So again, the variable name is $target. Okay, so I put $target. Okay, so it's just exactly the same way, that's all, and it's just a bit quicker. I don't have to keep writing it out all the time. I just have to write the variable name. Easier. So now what I'm going to do is inside of there I'm going to tell it to scroll to whatever element I want it to. Well, I want it to scroll to, and again I'm starting my statement off, and I'm going to say go ahead and scroll to page 1. Okay, and then I can say comma, and after that I can add timing to this. So I can say go ahead and take half a second or 500 milliseconds to animate it. Okay, so basically what's happened here is as soon as this anchor tag is clicked, it's going to grab the container element, okay, which is this right here. It's going to look at all of its children, or its nodes, which is all of these embedded div tags, and then it's going to tell it to scroll to whatever element I choose over a period of whatever time I choose. Okay, I can make that 2 seconds, 1 second, whatever I want, but I'm saying half a second. Okay, but the thing is, when I save this and I go ahead and refresh, okay, I say page 1, but it's already on page 1. If I say page 3 and then click on page 1, you'll see that it scrolls across, or basically down. Okay, so now what I need to do is just do that for all of the buttons. So I'm going to copy that, and because we use very generic naming, I just have to say when button 2 is clicked, go to page 2. Alright, it's going to be exactly the same thing 5 times. So we've got button 3, page 3, 4, and then page 4, button 5 is clicked, and it's going to scroll to page 5. Okay, so I'm going to save that, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to refresh, and then I'm going to click page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, and as you can see, it's scrolling all of those elements, and it's scrolling to the exact element that I've chosen it to. Okay, now the trouble is with this, we've still got those links targeting those DOM elements, and we've got JavaScript targeting those DOM elements, and it's not really what you should be doing. Okay, so yes, we want to make it degradable, so these need to stay in there, but as I said before, you can change attributes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to simply say, okay, we'll get all the anchor tags on the page. Alright, so I'm being very generic, and then I'm saying, okay, well, once you get all the anchor tags on the page, I want to change the attribute, okay, of the element, and I want to change the href attribute to hash. Alright, and that's pretty much it. Okay, so now when I save that and I go ahead and refresh, and we look inside of Firebug and go inside the body tags, you'll see that all the href attributes inside of those anchor tags is now set to hash. So that stops it from snapping to that element and then animating it. Okay, it can make really choppy animations. So when JavaScript is enabled, it changes the href attribute. When JavaScript is disabled, it changes back to the old method, which is page 1, page 2, page 3. Because don't forget that we're changing this attribute inside of JavaScript. Well, if JavaScript is disabled, it can't change the attribute. Therefore, it works with and without JavaScript. And that's what you should be doing, making your scripts degradable. Okay. So as you can see, it's doing some very, very nice animations here. Okay. Now, if you want a sideways scroll, there's one extra element that you've got to go to. So we've got our container element right here, and if we want them all to stack up next to one another, I have to, again, say, overflow hidden, you can do that if you want, but I need to set the width of this container to the total width of all of its child elements. So every child element is 200 pixels. Each page is 200 pixels in width. So if I've got 5 pages at 200 pixels, that makes it 1,000 pixels in width. So I'm going to set this to 1,000 pixels. Okay. So I have a width of 1,000 pixels, and then I need to mask this. Okay, because if I save that now and go ahead and refresh, you'll see that they're all stacked, and they're not going to scroll anywhere because you can see them all. Okay. So we need to mask them, alright, just like we did before with the container. So now what I've got to do is wrap that container inside of a div tag. So I'm just going to manually do this. I'm going to say, okay, create a div with an ID of, and we'll just call this mask. Okay, this is masking the whole thing out. And again, I'm going to put the ending div tag, okay, and the starting div tag and make sure that it's all wrapped inside of there. And again, if I indent this, you'll be able to see this a little bit easier. And you can see the higher DOM element, okay, or the highest DOM element, which is the mask, alright? Then the second DOM element is the container, and the child DOM elements are all the pages, okay? So you have the children, the second, and then the first, alright? That's the main DOM element, okay? That's on the same level as the body tag, alright? So now what I need to do is tell this mask to be the same size as the page. So again, I'm going to say, hey, hash, then mask, so it's finding an ID of mask. Then we're adding a width to this of 200 pixels, a height of 200 pixels, and again, we need to say overflow hidden. And just to give you a brief demonstration of what that's doing is what that's doing is if I open up the body tags and select the mask element, you'll see overflow set to hidden. If I delete that, you'll be able to see that now it's still the same size. You can see where it's selecting that element, you can see that little blue box that's highlighting up there. That's the actual size of the div tag. But if we don't tell it to hide anything that's overflowed, then it's no good. So what we're going to have to do is tell overflow hidden. So we can't see those pages, and we scroll to those pages when we choose, but we cannot see them yet. Okay? And so you probably think, okay, well that'll work, but it won't work, because the container, as you saw before, is the complete size of all the child elements. So that's going to be absolutely no good whatsoever. What we need to do is point to the highest DOM element there, which is the mask. Okay, as you can see in Firebug, it illustrates it very easily. The highest DOM element there is the div element with the ID of mask. Then the second one is container, and then we expand that, it shows all the child elements. And as you can see, they do exist, they're just not visible. Okay, little bit of CSS trickery going off. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to point to the highest DOM element, which isn't container anymore, because container is wrapped inside of the mask div. So I'm going to say mask, okay? So that is the highest DOM element. So now I'm going to go ahead and hit refresh, click on page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, and so on. You'll see that they're scrolling horizontally rather than vertically, okay? So that is in essence what the scroll to script is all about. Now I recommend you go back to the website and make sure that you read all the documentation, because you don't have to, target DOM elements. You could scroll anywhere, literally, wherever you want to go. So this is a really, really impressive script. Again, see the demo page. It gives you fantastic demos, and you can see straight away there, okay, what this script is doing. You can tell it to, again, scroll to a relative hash position, a percentage, an absolute position, and all the rest of it, okay? But you need to make sure that it's got something to scroll to, alright? So all the elements cannot be visually seen. They have to be sort of hidden in some way, okay? Or you have to have some form of scroll bar, okay? So this is really, really impressive stuff. It's very easy to use, as you've just seen. And also, you can make it degradable. So that is a very crucial thing that we're trying to learn here, is the fact that you shouldn't depend upon JavaScript to do everything. You should always make your scripts work without JavaScript. And I purposefully switch JavaScript off in my browser and see if my website still works the way that it should and still looks the way that it should. Okay, so never ever leave, styling or anything else like that up to JavaScript. You should always make sure you try and keep as much CSS in the CSS file, you keep as much HTML in the HTML file, and you try to do as little JavaScript as possible. That's the whole point of JQuery, and also making everything degradable. Okay. Alright, so enough about that. We're going to move on to the last plugin, and this plugin is called inner fade. Now this plugin lets you fade through a list. Okay, so these list elements can contain numbers, letters, links, images, anything you want. All you have to do is create an unordered list, give it an ID, and then just simply create some list elements, and then this inner fade script will take care of it all for you. So let's have a look and see what we can do. Well, I'm going to scroll right down to the bottom, and I'm going to download innerfade.zip. Okay, I can save that. Let's go ahead and save it, and I'm going to go to the downloads folder. Let's clear that, close it, go to downloads folder. Okay, and right here you'll be able to see JQuery innerfade.zip. I'm just going to delete the JQuery scroll to because I don't need that. And again, I'm going to extract it. Okay, and there is the content right there. And you know, you see all these index and images and so forth, but they aren't really needed. All we need is this file right here. Okay, this is just jQuery itself, but this is the file that we need, jQuery.innerfade.js. So I'm going to cut that out, and I'm going to paste it right in our source directory. I'm going to get rid of the two previous plugins, which was scroll2 scripts. Alright, so I'm going to get rid of them. I'm going to paste this in right now to the root directory of my website, and I'm going to close those down. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up Dreamweaver. I'm going to remove all of this code, and also all of this code, and also all the CSS as well. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove these two lines, okay, because we don't need those anymore. And again, we're going to import this plugin below where I've imported jQuery, but above my first script.js. So I'm going to open up the script tag, say source, select my source, and I want to select innerfade.js, and then I'm going to say type text/JavaScript. No surprise there. Okay, so now everything is ready to rock and roll with this script. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create an unordered list. So let's indent that. I'm going to create an unordered list. That's what UL stands for. Give it an ID. We'll just call this reel. Okay, like a reel of pictures. Alright. And we'll end the unordered list like so. Okay, now in between there, I'm going to add a few list items. Okay, so I say li for list item, and I close that off, and I'm going to insert an image in there. So again, I'm going to say image, okay, and we'll say source, and we'll go to the images folder, and we'll say Cartoon Smart BK. And we'll put a width in there and height. Alright, and we'll end that image tag, and then I'm going to add in another li tag like so, insert another image, say source src, select the location of the image, and then obviously we add a width and height to that. Okay, and then I'm just going to copy that and paste it 2 more times. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to change the source attributes. Okay, so that's the blue one, and that one is red. Okay, right. So now we've got our unordered list. If we save this and preview it, refresh, you'll see that we get all of our images. Now, don't worry so much about them stacking up one behind each other, because innerfade takes care of all of it. But these bullet points right here, okay, are not needed. We don't want them to be viewable. So all you've got to do is go ahead and select your unordered list. You can either do it generically by saying the tag name, or I can say hash, so that means get an ID of real, okay, and we can say list style type, and we just say none. And so what that leaves us with is these images lined up like so, but they have no bullet points next to them. Okay, fantastic. Now, don't worry about all that other stuff, because sit back and let InnerFade take care of it. So what we're going to do is we're going to click on my first script.js, and then what we're going to do is we're going to select the real element, the element with the ID of real, and then we're going to say dot inner fade. Okay, open brackets, open parentheses, close brackets, and end with a semicolon. So I'm just going to save that real quick, and let's see what we get. Alright, so you can see that straight away all these images are lined up behind one another, and you can see they're just fading through like so. Okay. Now, since I put the opening and closing parentheses in there, I might as well add some settings to this function. So let's define the animation type. So I can say animation type, okay, and then I can say, well, you can either have fade or you can have slide. Well, at the moment you can see that it's just fading from one image to the other. Nothing special about that. So let's take a look at the slide animation type. Hit refresh, and now you'll be able to see that it's sliding up and down. Okay, so those are the two different animation types you can have on this, or you could set this to fade as always. So if I refresh that, it just goes back to the old fading method. Alright, then I can put a comma in there, and let's add another property. That's why I put the comma in there. So we can choose how fast this animation is. So I could say speed, put a comma in there, and I can choose a again generically, so we can either say slow, normal, or fast. Okay, so I'm just going to say slow. So I'm going to hit refresh. Let's see how it is. It fades out a bit slower, or you could say fast. Hit refresh. As you can see, it's really quick at that point. So there's no messing about. Okay. You can also have timeout. So I'm just going to say slow again to that one. Then I'm going to put a comma in there. And then I'm going to use the time out property in setting, and I'm going to change that to say, okay, well, wait 3,000 milliseconds. So now when I go back and refresh, this is the amount of time the image is displayed for, and then the animation happens. So you can see that they're lasting for 1 elephant, 2 elephant, 3 elephant, and then they're fading out. So that's 3 seconds that it waits, and then it does the animation. So speed is how fast the animation is actually going, whether that be fade or slide. Timeout is how long it takes for the image to move on to the next image. And you can also have type. So I can say type, and then I can either choose a sequence, random, or random start. So we'll just say, in quotation marks, sequence, much like it's doing now. Okay, so I can save that, go ahead and hit refresh, and then you'll see it's going through in a sequence. Alright, basically what it's doing is it's going 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and it's just looping over and over again from top to bottom, top to bottom, top to bottom. But then you can also mix things up and say, okay, well, you can be random, okay, so it can display images at its own will. So now starting out with the red one, then we go to the normal one, so it's just choosing those different elements completely randomly. Alright, no sequence whatsoever. And then you can have random underscore start. So it's going to start randomly, and then it should go back into a sequence. So it's going to start. Okay, and then you'll see it selects the first one randomly, so it selects the red one first, and then it goes back to the sequence. Okay. So it's really, really easy to do, okay? And that's pretty much covering the inner fade. It's very, very easy, but it can save you a ton of time. And if you go over to the top of this page, you will see all those different settings that you can set on this function, and you can change to the way you want it. Alright, well, it's time for me to plug in my devil's advocate, because I want to show you my website and see how I've used these plugins. So if you head on over to my website, you'll see elite-wd, standing for Elite Web Design. But the thing about this is you can easily see that I've used the scroll to, much like I did with the pages. Okay, so we have the pages, alright, that scroll. Okay, that's a very nice, interesting effect. And then we've got the services page. You can see the inner fade on this little Mac screen over here, so that's good. And I hope to incorporate the fancy box when I finish this site, but this is just giving you a little bit of inspiration on how I used it, so you can use it for anything. There are a ton of websites that move and change about and scroll the pages and everything else, and it's becoming more common because it's a completely new way to navigate, and it's fantastic. Also, you'll notice that when you switch JavaScript off on my website, you still get everything viewable, so it's completely degradable, this website. If you switch off JavaScript, okay, you won't get the fancy animations behind there, and you won't get the fancy sliding animations, but you will be able to view the pages and view the content on those pages, and that's the important thing. Still getting the message across even without JavaScript, but JavaScript just makes it a bit more fancy, a bit more cool, a bit more chic, and it draws the user in. It really does empower the message that your website delivers. So I hope that you can use some of this stuff in your websites. Keep playing, keep having a go. Read through some of the JQuery documentation if you need to know some things that are new to you. They are fantastic, and I guarantee you, you are on the right track to learning some really cool JQuery and JavaScript. Thank you very much for watching.